Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee. This meeting is live streamed on YouTube, so welcome to everyone viewing online. Members who have joined us remotely will not be able to vote, and your attendance will not be officially recorded, but will be noted in the minutes. Can everyone online hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Welcome. Concerning meeting etiquette, please direct all questions to myself. May I ask that you indicate you wish to speak by raising your physical hand if you're here, present in the room, in the chamber, or your virtual hand. For the benefit of the present public, when you're speaking for the first time, can you give your name and your role within the organization? May I remind members to speak clearly for the recording and also for the minute and the record keeping so that the clerk can record accurately what is being said. Having said that, this meeting of the London Borough of Newham Overview and Scrutiny Committee is called to order. Welcome again to everyone present. Can I ask before there is an agenda change, and that would be the transformation item that we should, that is listed on our agenda, but is deferred to our next overview and scrutiny meeting, which is in 2 days' time on the 8th of May. Can I ask that this item be deferred to the 8th of May? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Having done that piece of formality, I now introduce myself. The benefit of the public, I am Anthony McCormick, Chair of Overview and Scrutiny Committee and member for Royal Albert. And I now pass you on to Councillor Masters.
Hi, I'm Councillor Masters. I'm Chair of Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny and represent East Ham South.
Councillor James Beckles from Custom House. I'm on the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny.
I'm an observer.
And an observer.
Councillor Winston Vaughan, representing Forthgate South Road.
Rita?
Councillor Rita Shutter, Kenny Town North. Councillor Pauline Parkway, Gloucester South. Councillor for East Ham South Ward. Education and CYPS Scrutiny Chair. Rich McCoy, Director of Law and Governance.
That was very quiet. I'm not sure that the recorder pick it up, but it's Rachel, our managing officer.
Yes.
Okay.
Paul Kitson, Corporate Director for Inclusive Economy, Housing and Culture.
Thank you. And present in the room?
Artemis Cassie, Head of Scrutiny and Governance.
And?
I'm Sandy, Scrutiny Officer.
And then those in line.
Hi there, Chair. It's Mayor Roxana Fiaz, the Portfolio Lead for Inclusive Economy and Strategic Housing Delivery and Culture.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
And we have another officer colleague, Chair.
James Cross.
Okay. Thank you. All right. What's your role, James?
I'm a Senior Development Manager in Inclusive Economy, Housing and Culture.
Okay, thanks for that information. Okay, can I now move on to item 2, which is apologies for absence? Are there any apologies? I have on my other paper here, Ellen Kemp, and Paul Leslie, and Councillor Terence Paul, I believe that we, and Councillor Terence Paul. Is there any other apologies?
Councillor Joshua Garfield.
Okay, and Councillor Joshua Garfield. Are those apologies noted? Declaration of interest. Are there any members wishing to declare any interest? The clock would note that there no declaration of interest. Minutes of our meeting. I move that the minutes of our meeting on the 1 minute. Can I come back to the minutes in a few minutes? I beg your pardon. We already done the transformation. We talked about that one, so I now move to item 7, and that's the common old tenure. And we have Paul is here to speak to us on this paper, which is in our agenda pack. So Paul, can you take us through this item, please?
Chair, thank you for that. I'm assuming that all members have seen a copy of the short report, 2 or 3 sides. We were asked to provide a report on the new common hold consultation being undertaken by the government. Basically, sort of 3 bits. The first thing that it notes, of course, is that the common hold as a property ownership model has been around for about 20 years, but hasn't been utilised that much. Of course, it complements the freehold and the leasehold, which are the other 2 main property ownership tenures. So what does common hold mean? It means it is about where you've got multi-use buildings or multi-residence buildings. So these are blocks of flats. What does common hold mean? Each resident owns their flat outright. And then shared spaces, which are hallways, entrance halls, roofs, gardens, are then also jointly owned, managed through a common hold association, a company comprising of all unit owners. Of course, that is different from leasehold, where somebody owns the underlying freehold of the block, usually then contracts to the management company, charges ground rent, and so on. So the common hold eliminates several contentious aspects of leasehold. There's no ground rents, there's no lease expirations. Now, of course, those of you who lived in leasehold properties will know that you need to renew the lease to an acceptable level in order to sell it. Is undue control over the freeholder, over the leaseholder. No third-party freeholder control as well. However, the report notes that 20 years in the making, it's relatively underused at the moment. So the government has announced just 2 months ago a new white paper announcing its intention for a ban on new leasehold flats in England and Wales. Leasehold houses have already been banned for new builds, and a reintroduction of common hold as a standard tenure for all new multi-unit residential buildings. This follows off the back of many years, probably a decade and a half of intense lobbying from a range of different residents and consumer groups across the country, who have been rallying about the injustice of leasehold properties, in particular management charges and ground rent costs. So this is something the government's pursuing. The white paper, its comprehensive common hold reform package has been proposed, simplifies governance structures, enhanced legal protection for owners, and improved distribution processes. The white paper critically also outlines a voluntary path for existing leaseholders to convert to common hold, and this is something that the lobby groups have been pushing for most strongly, I think, through a simplified collective enfranchisement process. So key points of this would be the leaseholders must first acquire the freehold on block. Conversion to common hold would follow via a structured legal process, and the government aims to make this more affordable and legally straightforward. So quite powerful changes there to housing tenure. So one of the things we were asked was to really understand what are the implications for councils. Is it a positive thing or a negative thing? And so what we've done in the report is listed those out. Rather, my colleague in property has Lara. Implications for council, strategic and ownership implications, the financial implications, and some of the legal implications. I'm not going to read them all out because we'll go to a discussion in a minute. And then some of the operational implications. There's a series of risk and mitigation strategies flowing from that. And then I'm just going to go right to the bottom bit, really, with recommendations for London Council. So like many issues that face Newham Council, they're the same issues faced by other councils. And so there's been a collective piece of work done by London councils across the piece. And they've got 6 recommendations there, which we're beginning to work through. None of these have been fully implemented yet at all. Develop a strategy, so create a common hold preparedness plan across planning, legal, housing and development functions. Develop some internal expertise, engage developers early, public education campaigns so that people understand what's in front of them, what their art of the possible is, create support frameworks, and then wider public sector partnerships. So, and then the paper concludes This reform is a once in a generation shift in housing law and practice by acting early London boroughs, especially those with active housing delivery roles like Newham, can ensure a smooth and informed transition to a system that promotes fairer, more sustainable home ownership. So hopefully that summarises the paper fairly briefly, but there's quite a lot in there, so happy to move to questions.
Thank you. Any member? And Councillor Masters.
What isn't clear in the paper is firstly whether this is a compulsory change and all properties are going to have to go down this route, and whether at any stage there was any effort made to exempt social housing.
Can I respond, Chair?
Yes, you may.
So this would be in new build properties, in new build blocks of flats, common hold would be the default setting. So the white paper is saying that would now be the only option for new build. Where it affects council properties, so a block of flats where we have some council tenants and we have some leaseholders, it wouldn't be possible to go to the common hold format anyway, because you've had some tenants, some leaseholders, you wouldn't be able to buy the whole block en masse. So it doesn't really apply to those sorts of your standard Newham blocks where you've got lots of different types of people in there, leaseholders and tenants. So I think that's what you were getting at.
So they don't have the same right. So if you're a leaseholder in a council block, you couldn't get together with a group of leaseholders and buy a section of that council block.
So that's a really good question. And I might have to take that away. I mean, the monitoring officer might have a view on that. The white paper, of course, is at its early stage. So actually how the consultation and how that evolves will be quite interesting to see. I think, on a practical basis, it would have to be a very clearly identifiable section of a building, wouldn't it, to work? And you'd then, in order to be able to carve out the costs associated with that and the ownership of it. So that could be quite complex still. But I think there is a certain amount to play for. And this is quite a significant move on from where we were as a society, say 2 years ago even. So it is likely that there's going to be kind of quite a bit of momentum behind this. There's such a lot of public and popular pressure behind these reforms.
So are you saying then that with the new blocks that are being built, and I know we're going to get on to the work of the Affordable Homes Programme and later in this meeting, if any of those new developments have a homes for social rent element, that this wouldn't apply? It has to be a building where all the tenure is within the private sector. Is that what you're saying?
Again, that's a really good question. And I'd have to take that away and look at how it's evolving. Because it might be easier, it might be easier to build in the ownership structure from the new build rather than historically. So it might be possible, especially with a housing association, for example, for them to be, as a housing association, a part owner of that freehold, of that common hold, and still rent out their property on a social basis.
Just on the back of Susan, I see you, Rita, coming to you. Just on the back of it, if I were a council tenant, and I noticed in the paper you said the government is facilitating a voluntary pathway, and I know that if I push for the common old tenure, I don't have to pay service charge. I don't have to pay the leaseholders charges or leaseholder renewal charges and all of those charges that leaseholders are faced with. I can see where leaseholders would be pressing to be equated with the others the properties that are being built now, because they're going to save. And I noticed on your paper you said here they would not pay the management charges, they won't pay it for lease extension, ground rent, and all of those. So that is a lot of savings for some of our residents, and they may very well push to that. What is the mechanism? And if they do, how are we going to facilitate? Suppose in a block that we have 5 or some blocks may not have 5, people wanted to enjoy those rights. Are we going to, I suppose Susan was asking something similar. Are we going to facilitate that for them?
I think this is where we come to those recommendations at the end about developing internal expertise and liaising with councils across London, is to understand what the implications are. I think every block would be different. There could be some blocks which were primarily leasehold, where you might be able to venture more towards that. I must point out though, I mean, even common hold, a collective, and you can imagine if, I don't know, you could pick any number, 20 flats, they're still going to have to find a mechanism for the common ownership and maintenance of the building. So it's not without cost, it just means that the costs are more transparent, more readily controlled, more in the hands of the people that own a common hold rather than a managing agent, where a lot of the controversial issues have been raised across the country about high levels of service charge, high levels of administration fees and so on and so forth, which people think is unjust.
But the private sector has that already, where you may have a estate where you have a lot of flats and just maybe one or two houses, and they're charging a different service charge, different. And I suppose that is for the common old bit, like for the gardening, the landscaping, and so on, the public realm bit, but they're not charged. And the flat owners are then charged the bulk because they are now charged as leaseholders. So that system exists already in terms of something similar exists already. So I suppose that can be looked at. It's operational already. Rita.
So I wanted to alert you to the mayor's hand up, but I'll just ask my question quickly. Do we have any idea about the number of units or the number of properties affected? We wouldn't have that data already, would we?
So, Jen, do you mean the number of new build properties that will come forward? We would be able to come up with a forecast of through the annual monitoring report through the planning system of what our developers and planning commissions say they're going to build over time. So we would be able to say very crudely what we think the build out rate of new homes would be in Newham, and therefore through the planning system we'd know what were going to be flats and what were going to be houses. That would be one way of estimating how many people might benefit from or experience this new property tenure.
And the paper makes several references to Poplar. Is it a given that Poplar will be asked to intervene in this space, or is it a proposal at this stage?
I think this paper is trying to reflect that Poplar are building new homes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that they would be subject to the new possible tenure and the white paper implications as well as everybody else.
It reads like they'll have an active role in working alongside the council in managing that. That's how I read it. In managing some of the new relationships. That's why I was asking, do you envisage a specific role for Poplar in this new world order?
Yeah, so we would expect them to support us like they do, and they bring expertise. We've spoken about this before, we'll speak about it later in the meeting. Development expertise that they've got across new properties, state regeneration, so on. So yes, I suppose they would have a role in that regard. But I think really, I suppose the thrust of the paper is that Poplar would be subject to the outcomes of the white paper review.
Councillor Lee Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I just wanted you just to clarify. I'm not sure if I have misunderstood. Just in regards to the question that Councillor Masters already asked in regards to multi-tenure blocks. Am I correct in saying that a block that has multi-tenure, that be leaseholders and maybe social rents or shared ownership, they wouldn't be covered under this?
So I don't think they would be, because I think it would be too difficult at the moment to see how you could get collective buyouts off the freehold. So I think on our standard council block of flats which have leasehold and tenanted homes, I think the default would be that the council would retain the landlord function, maintenance responsibilities, and then recharging back to leaseholder in quite a conventional way.
Okay, so I'm just thinking about our planning policy in regards to multi-tenure living rather than, a leasehold block, council block, whatever it may be. Would it then apply to that? Would we then are we going to be thinking about changing our policy to meet what this is asking us to do going forward?
So the key thing really is about making sure that we're watching the evolution of the white paper and what it really means. So it's easy to say the answer I've just given on our existing council blocks. We already sort of explored in the conversation on new build blocks where it's easier to start from scratch. Then we might find ourselves subject to it and wanting to take advantage of the new legislation should it come through. Because I think there's a difference between the new stuff that we might build and our existing stock.
Thank you.
But it's not all entirely clear, which I hope the paper kind of gets through a little bit, that it's a moving picture as well. But it tries to sort of set out what the major risks and opportunities are there.
Thank you. Mayor Fiaz.
Thank you very much. Apologies, I can't be there in person. I just wanted to help aid some of the discussion. The paper, first and foremost, is primarily about popular living as a development manager in the delivery of our housing unit output. There is potentially a role for popular living in the context of its position, because it has a subsidiary as a registered provider. And as Paul said, we need to work through and understand better the implications of the legislation and proposals put forward by government, because they will undoubtedly have both a positive influence in the wider market as it relates to renters' rights and security of tenure. And also it will help inform some of the policy decisions of the council and the administration. And I just wanted to conclude by saying that I welcome any thoughts, ideas from overview and scrutiny members in this regard. Sorry, the members of this scrutiny commission in this regard, because it will help formulate policy. There was a question as to whether or not we know the scale of impact of this policy proposal, which is presently out for consultation. And once the consultation period concludes, we'll then need to wait for government to present its final position. And it may be very different to what's being presented now. And in line with what Paul has said, London councils will take a collective view, and where members of London councils, and we'd articulate and lobby our position in that regard. But in terms of the data set, we would have a baseline of data as it relates to the private rented landlord licensing scheme that we could utilise in our analysis around the impact. So I hope that helps. I just didn't want to conflate a whole set of really important questions being raised as it relates to this new regime that the government is being consulted on the paper, which is specific to council housing delivery by by a specific part of popular living.
Thank you very much. Thank you, is this directed to the mayor, because that many analysts is waiting to come in? Is this okay?
I just want to state.
Rita.
I just want to state for the record, I'm very confused now completely about what the status of this document. I read this document as an advisory note on prospective legislation coming in, but that's still being consulted on. So we have no definite plans either way. So Mayor, your comment that this is about Poplo, Poplo's a feature in this, but not a definite given, is it, at this stage? It can't be.
If I may. Sorry.
Shall I interject, Mayor?
No, it's okay, because I could speak if that's okay with you. Apologies, my conflation of two separate papers. So there's a paper as it relates to popular living development management, which we'll be coming to. But as it relates to popular living and its role in this new regime that the government is being consulted on, obviously as a registered provider, it will need to be subject to the new legislative regime, and we will need to think about the implications. And yes, it's an advisory note, but I'm also interested in the context of lobbying points as we articulate them and surface them in our engagement within the London Council's arena and elsewhere. I would welcome any thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Rita has got it right. We know that this is happening, and we just wanted to have the conversation. So it's an advisory note on what's happening. And obviously, we are concerned because if people are going to be building, for instance, the Carpenter's estate, when all those properties are going to be built, some of it would be different, for instance, in the traditional way before this paper came on stream. So basically what's going to happen, and I suppose this where we, as an authority, would have to decide on the spot with advice, etc., and what government may do when this, if it does become law, how the legislation is framed to take into account all those thousands of homes that we are planning to build now. I'm not even talking about the ones that is already built, and we have people living in it, because we have, how many leaseholders do we have in the borough? 6 to 7,000 leaseholders?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with those 6 to 7 leaseholders, we might be pushing collectively to be free from the shackles of council, sorry, maybe that wasn't the right word, but when they don't want to be paying management fee, because this is basically not every leaseholder think that they're getting value for money. And when leaseholders complain to us members, they always complain that they're not getting value for money. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Shaw.
Going to ask about the apartment as well, this is.
Yeah.
Just want to understand when it's collective management, so they might have a common hold association to manage shared areas and costs and everything. They'll have more control. What will happen within that association if there were disputes? Who would intervene? Would it be the council, or will there be a different body to sort those problems out?
It's a good question, and I don't think it's clear. So I think when the government say they're trying to simplify the legal structures and the governance structures, they're obviously trying to explore whether templates or advice might be helpful for groups of people to come together to set something up. And in doing so, there would have to be provisions there for what would happen in case of disputes as well. So I think where it obviously works best is where the property is quite simple, numbers of property are quite small, the common areas and common responsibilities are quite easily defined. They'll be relatively simple, but still disagreement because people. So whatever organisation you set up as common hold group will need to have provisions there for dispute money. No, I think that's what the government's working through.
Councillor, but if I just because I have, as I said, personal experience, because the community interest, I'm a director of a residence association that has a mixed use, where you have a council, not council, you have a block of flats and they're the leaseholders, and they have people who own their properties. What they do, they charge the houses that are freehold for the security guard service and for the public realm, the gardening, etc. And they pay for that service. And there is a management committee, the resident association, just for those houses, for the bits of service that they receive. They only pay for the bits of service they receive. And then the block of flats, the high-rise, low-rise that get every other thing, they pay a separate service charge. So you have two kind of tenure, if you like, and people pay according to the service. And I suppose that is what would happen. And they have a board of tenants, residents who manage that bit and oversee that bit. So I suppose that might be a model that most people would want to adopt in the future, who owns the freehold, and they just pay for the bits of the service they receive. Because it'll be costed, divvy up proportionately, and then that's it. That's a model. And I suppose because it's something that is going to be in the making, not yet set in stone, there's a lot of options that might be out there that we can adopt. And Councillor Hudson.
So the big risk from the point of view of the unemployed, new and popular is that normal lease is amortised. So therefore, once you reach the end of the value of your lease, there's an opportunity to recharge the person for the full value. I'm working on the assumption that under common hold, that opportunity is lost. So presumably, in any asset, any private flat that the council sells within popular, under common hold, there will be a loss of value to the council. There must be. Because by implication, in the sense that you won't have the opportunity to renew the lease.
Yeah.
Under common hold, there's still going to be shared costs for the management of the property. So for that loss, do we know what that estimate is going to be for popular? Because you're developing those properties in the next couple of years. And presumably, if it's applied to council properties, there will be a loss within the HRA as well. But I would assume that'd be much more complicated account. But the popular one, I would have thought would be more pertinent one, because you're developing those properties now for sale.
Yeah.
flat, I would have thought.
Yeah.
If it's under common hold, there must be a loss of value. And it must affect the viability, I would have thought.
So can I answer?
Yes, you may.
I'm not sure I've got a very simple answer, but you're entirely right. In the sense that if you take a developer that's built a block of flats and they're going to be leasehold, then there's an income in perpetuity, essentially, according to the lease, for whoever owns the freehold. And that becomes a commercial commodity. So they can sell that because it's got a guaranteed return. And the leasehold will give it parameters of how it can be increased over time. The income of selling that then is factored into the developer's viability. So, and therefore, so will the leasehold renewals into the investor who's buying the freehold. You get the picture. So that will have to flow through as you get into new builds for common hold. That will flow through the viability somehow, and it's too early to say how that would flow through. In a very simplistic way, you could say that developers might choose to then attempt to recoup some of the charge they would have normally got through the leaseholder model and charge a higher premium for the purchase originally. That would be a very crude way of looking at it. But that sort of thing does need to, it'll flow through as it becomes more prevalent. But you're right, there is as you change the tenure, there is a financial impact to the way that the money moves between developer, resident, management company and so on.
Okay.
And presumably, given that these developments are imminent, the ones for sale in the property model, presumably you must have a grip on the how much to spend in council.
Yes, there'll be a viability model there that's been used for the assessment of the scheme all the way through to the completion of it. Yeah.
You don't know how much that is at the moment.
Off the top of my head, no, I don't. But part of the items at the end of this advisory note obviously do say build up internal expertise, link with other boroughs and so on to build up a picture of the different scenarios and the way this might work through. And that's going to be quite important, the reasons you've highlighted.
Yeah, so that is a piece of work that is going to be done to because it's going to have, as Councillor Austin says, it's going to have an impact on a negative impact on the HRA, and it's going to have an impact on the popular.
So, Chair, sorry, I didn't say it was going to have a negative impact on the HRA.
Pardon?
I didn't say it was going to have a negative.
No. I'm saying because from the point of view that if the revenue that the HRA would have received if this go ahead and people are no longer having to pay certain charges, like the leasehold charges and the management charges, that goes into the HRA budget, isn't it?
It's unclear at the moment how the money would flow through.
No, but it currently goes into the budget, isn't it? Into the HRA budget.
Yeah.
Income stream, it does. So if they're not receiving that, that's why I call it a negative impact, because I'm receiving X pounds today, and tomorrow I'm not receiving that, then that's a negative impact, isn't it?
If the common hold tenure applies.
Yes.
Yes, and there's quite a lot of ifs to flow through across the coming months.
We know we are uncertain times because it's a paper that is being developed and so on, that people are going to be making their contributions to it. But if it does go ahead as intended, then there was going to be a negative impact. That's what I'm implying. But we have to wait and see. Any other member? Okay. Yeah. Mayor Fiaz.
Thank you very much, Chair. Look, just reflecting on the last set of comments that you've made and also the comments made by Councillor Huston. He's absolutely spot on. These are key considerations that we're going to need to consider, and the whole point of seizing the opportunity now is to elevate and service to government as part of that advocacy, the implications, because a number of councils, not just Newham, have invested significantly, either drawing down from housing grant or HRA monies in order to deliver homes to meet one particular housing need. And yes, we understand and recognise that in the context of rights that should be held by those living in these types of developments, and it needs to be enhanced, that needs to be improved. So how do you square the both? So I think this conversation and debate and the questions that you've raised are really pertinent and valuable ones. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other, I now I move on, and I recognize Councillor Moser, who just came in. You may want to introduce yourself before I go back to the minutes, colleagues.
Councillor Mirza Bolingbor.
Yeah, thank you. So this, may I take you back to the item that I before the minutes of our last meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of February 2025 be recorded as a correct record. Do I have a second to that? Okay, I'm Councillor Lee Parkway, second. Thank you, colleagues. And we now move on to our next item, which is the strategic housing. And the purpose of this item is to receive and review an update on the Newham Council Strategic Housing Delivery Program. Specifically, this report provides the Review and Scrutiny Committee with an update on how the Council Strategic Housing Delivery through its Affordable Homes for Newham program and estate regeneration and restoration schemes such as the Custom House, Cannington, and the Carpenters Estate. I am looking at the time now, and I would allocate about 50 minutes for this discussion. That is just a guide. I hope we stick to that. All right. Mayor Fias, this is in your portfolio area, and you have 2 minutes to introduce this item.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't intend to take the full 2 minutes, but I trust that the members of this commission found this report useful. It sets out the various routes through which we're delivering against our corporate plan intent that reflects manifesto commitments as it results in term 1 and term 2, and you will have some information concerning the quantum number of homes that will be built. There is level of information and detail that is currently being worked through so that by the time of publication we have the most exact detail that will be contained in a report coming to Cabinet in June. And as the report sets out, we welcome Scrutiny's engagement on this really important area of council delivery, not least because of the large sums of money involved and the borrowing exposure that this presents, because I know that that's been an area of concern amongst some members on this committee, but sitting on overview and scrutiny in the budget working party. But the report sets out the history around the delivery across the intent of the administration through its corporate plan, 1,000 in term 1 and 1,500 in term 2. Not all of the term 2 are through exclusively direct delivery through build. It's also acquisitions. And it also sets out the intended plan for Popular Living to be the development management entity that we will utilise because of the skill and capability that it has developed over the past 7 years. Happy to take questions. We have James Cross, who has been working on and across a lot of the detail. And the report, in essence, sets out the Affordable Homes for Newham programme, covers off acquisitions, and also talks through our housing delivery as it relates to 3 of our major estate restoration and regeneration programmes, Carpenters, Cannington and Custom House. And we're happy to answer questions. I just wanted to say, by way of conclusion, there may well be information that you would expect in the report, but because we're going through the diligence of the numbers, that won't be contained until the report is published for Cabinet, and there are further conversations to be had. But I very much welcome this conversation with all of you this evening as part of really important pre-decision scrutiny making. And one of the things that I am noting is the conversation on the previous paper and the implications as it relates to housing delivery and also council borrowing and the position of popular living, be it popular living core or popular living in terms of its registered provider status, is something that we are working through. And then finally, on the issue of and now I've lost my thought because I was interrupted, but there's one final thought I wanted to add. Oh, the final point that I wanted to make is, as you will note in the report, there's a section as it relates to learning from our strategic housing delivery programme, Affordable Homes for Newham, to date. And that's something that I and the officer team are amplifying as a important area of practice, and another reason and justification as to why we want to transfer development management role to popular living more and more. I'll conclude there.
Thank you, Councillor Charter.
May I ask a point of clarification, because I'm confused by this report. Maybe I'm not having much luck this evening. Section 2 sort of says it's a recommendation and we're asked to note the key lines of inquiry. But section 6, under which there is a subheading 4.1, says that this is a consultation. And I know the Mayor has also just stated that this is pre-scrutiny decision as well. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not experienced enough to understand and navigate my way through this. What is the status of the discussion this evening?
Okay, so if I may, Chair, so it's a response to the key lines of inquiries as best as officers and myself can, in the context of a cabinet report being developed, worked through and finalised, and the all-important conversations that need to happen, as is ordinarily the case as we work on finalising cabinet reports for publication at the executive level. It's also pre-decision in so much as we're providing you information. You will have some views as to the direction that we're having, and we'll take those into account, hence it's pre-decision making. And consultation, as in we're consulting you on some of our thinking.
Sorry, can I just be clear from the monitoring officer? If today we formed a conclusion on this paper and Cabinet then received a version that may have included some of our discussion and may not have included others, does that prevent us to bringing it back and calling it in?
No, not at all. So even a pre-decision scrutiny, because I see the kind of where you're a little bit unclear about it, whether it's an update report or if it's but even if it were a pre-decision scrutiny in the whole sense of like, that's what you're looking at, this whole issue for pre-decision, you can still call in. It doesn't negate a call in, a pre-decision scrutiny. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Masters.
I'm really confused reading this paper about where we're going with Populo and the affordable homes problem, because there just seems to be a lot of duplication going on in terms of the development role and in terms of what they're trying to do. My understanding was that Populo was repurposed to deliver homes for social rent, and yet now we've got the affordable housing programme. So I'd just like some clarity on the future strategy for both. And then the second thing, on a different note, I was very surprised to see the comments on Victoria Street on page 11. I'm not sure whether this paper's out of date and somebody just hasn't picked up on the fact that it refers to the redevelopment of Victoria Street. As far as I'm aware, Scrutiny never got a response to our call-in. So I'm not aware that any decision's been taken, because I would have assumed if it had, that would have been fed back to the Chair of Overview. And I'm slightly surprised, if I'm wrong, and this is actually happening, that we're going ahead with demolishing a building. And if I remember from the call-in correctly, this would leave us with nothing to replace those units of self-contained accommodation for, I think it was a 4-year delivery period. And the costs have gone up too, to 60 million. I'm just wondering whether I've missed something and whether the council's financial woes have ended, or maybe the temporary accommodation crisis has ended and it's no longer important for us to have self-contained units of accommodation rather than paying overnight charges. So I'd like some clarity around what's going on with Victoria Street and why as well.
Councillor Masters, Victoria Street, the cabinet did come back to us in terms of Victoria Street. And what we know they're going to do meanwhile use as it is currently, and that is going to be for 3 years, and with the option to extend it for 4 years. And that is all we know, that is what we know the position on Victoria Street to be.
But I don't remember anything about going ahead of this redevelopment.
No, because that would be taken in 3 years, so maybe another 2 years, because we called in Victoria Street about a year or so ago, isn't it?
Yes.
So therefore, there's another 2 years, and the option was to extend the meanwhile use to further 1 year if it's necessary. So it's a 4 years, 3 to 4 years period. And by then, the decision would be made on what happens to Victoria Street.
Okay, so it's not set in stone.
No.
Thank you.
Not as I understand it. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Chair, you've accurately described the position as it is, and ultimately there is a vision for Victoria Street, which is part of a redevelopment and restoration, well, redevelopment of the site. So it contributes to Stratford vision. So that's an ultimate end goal, but no decision has been made. I do really want to just pick up on 2 additional points that you've made. And, you know, I'm really sorry to have to raise it, but make the point. But just for clarification and for the record, the administration and the council are acutely alert to the ongoing temporary accommodation challenge before the council. It's the reason why we've had to set out the budget proposals as were and as approved of full council, and why we have had to apply for exceptional financial support, and why budget setting as it relates to the 2026-27 year is going to be additionally exacting. So I just want to, for the avoidance of doubt, because it's something that keeps on coming up and something that you keep on mentioning, Councillor Masters, and if it helps reassure or to clarify, I'm more than happy to write you a letter to state unequivocally the council, of course, recognises and is responding to a temporary accommodation crisis, and the council is, of course, acknowledging, recognises and is dealing firsthand with the budget challenges that it faces. But for whatever reasons, you're a bit unclear, but I'm happy to have a conversation with you in that regard in another place and at another time.
All right. Any other member? Okay. Can I see Councillor Austin put his hands on the take it on back side. Yes.
First question wasn't answered about the actual future strategy of Populo and how that related to the affordable homes programme.
I was going to do a follow-up and a supplementary, but no, you go ahead in terms of
No, I just haven't had the answer.
Mayor, do you Councillor?
Yeah, so the paper sets out the proposals around the future strategy of Populo living, and as mentioned in one section, I'll invite James and Paul to elaborate. There is a proposal that Populo living occupies the role of development management or manager for the council, given the enhanced and over the years, the knowledge, insight and expertise it has built up. So if you read a particular section, and I think for the benefit of all members, just to reiterate that there is in this report an overview, there is further detail to come, but that detail is just making its way through our appropriate governance decision-making process. And once that's concluded, we will obviously provide further information to Scrutiny. So you may not get the expansiveness of response or detail that you are used to in this meeting as it relates to this report. But please let me assure you that there is a live thinking around the strategy which we have touched on in this regard as it relates to popular living. And through the chair, it would be helpful if I, through you and your approval of permission, invite either Paul or James to talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. So, thank you, Mayor. So in the report, there's a helpful paragraph, it's on page 3 of the report, it's phase 2, 4.1.5, where it talks about the strategy and the way the housing delivery strategy has evolved to some degree. It talks about from 2021, there being a programme of affordable house building, which is partly through housing services, partly through the council's community wealth building team, and then some sites were also assigned to populate. And it's useful to reflect on that because the strategy has evolved over time. Strategy should react and respond to changes in the environment, changes to circumstances. And so 4 years later, Populo has built up more experience, a stronger workforce. We've spoken about this before in these meetings. The council has brought, to avoid the duplication issues that you've spoken about before and overlap, has brought the house building capability into one place within the council. And now the strategy leaning forward that James and the Mayor have articulated is to essentially ask Populo to do more of the development management for the council. And that's the direction of travel. We've spoken to Populo to it, we've spoken to our own teams about it. We haven't completed that, but it is a direction of travel. So Councillor Masters, when you ask about what is the direction of travel, that's it really. But we do need to complete that exercise. But you can sort of see the evolution of it as over the past sort of 4 or 5 years. And absolutely right, duplication is not anything the council can afford at the moment. Where we have a pool of particular expertise, we should be relying on that more than other parts of the council. So consolidation and expertise, I think, is the
thank you. Councillor Hudson, then Shaw, then Lee Parkway. Hudson.
A couple of questions. The abortive costs, I will note that there's a paper which is coming to Cabinet in June 25. On the abortive schemes, I know you haven't put any pound signs about how much that's cost. Presumably, that must be a serious 7-figure sum in terms of the abortive costs.
Shall I respond? I might ask James to come in a moment, but we had, I can't remember whether it was a housing and regen scrutiny, or whether it was an overview scrutiny, or indeed whether it was audit, but we had a detailed conversation about cost overruns, overall contingency budget, around about May, June, July last year, where those figures were made entirely available to scrutiny. So we can make those available again if it would be helpful, but certainly we had quite a detailed discussion at the time about those costs and how they were dealt with. I know. Was it audit? It was audit, thank you.
If the figures were available, but why haven't you included the figures in this report? It'd be more comprehensive if we actually saw how much it costs in this overview and scrutiny. Right? I know I'm a very sad numbers person, but
no, I take your point, Catherine. I take your point.
The second question is about the affordable housing programme. And is it actually affordable for Newham Council? Given the budget gap that you have over the next 3 years, given that the budget gap in the last budget that was approved by Council, it falls off a cliff in 4 years' time, subject to additional government funding, but given the level of uncertainty, how affordable is the affordable housing programme to the London Borough of Newham? So we're going to the assumption that any new unit that you add in the next couple of years, rent is going to be less than management maintenance and interest, which just adds to your budget gap. I would have thought.
I think. Can I respond, Chair?
Yes, you may.
I think it's important to note that the affordable homes building programme that's happened so far, all of those schemes have produced a positive net present value, and the reason they've done that. Because we've factored in the forecast rent. We've also been, as the paper does outline in some detail, successful in attracting affordable housing grants in order to support financially those schemes. The council has borrowed, in many cases, PWLB finance to support the development, but the costs of that borrowing are offset by the value of the income and so on and so forth. So we're borrowing against fixed assets that yield both social good and produce rent. The viability going forward, looking forward into the future, has become much harder for everybody across London, and especially those building affordable homes. Build costs have got higher, obviously. Regulation costs have got higher and so on and so forth. And interest rates have got much higher over recent years as well. We factor all of those into the appraisals that we do for new schemes. In addition, we've got a particularly strong relationship with the GLA and our ability to utilise their grant funding. So each and every scheme becomes harder and harder, Councillor Hudson, to match viability. What the council is not doing at the moment is it's not subsidising through its own cash, or it's not funding schemes that are unfunded. It's borrowing money against schemes which pay back over time, utilising grants to offset the costs. And that's the approach that we'll continue to do. I can see the Mayor has her hand up as well, Chair.
Chair, may I respond to the issue about net present value? While you're talking about showing net present value, a famous economist did say, in the long run, we are all dead. And the nature of net present value is that if you show future income streams in year 25, year 30, it may show a positive net present value. But the key point is in the next 5 years, the finances of Newham Council falls off a cliff. And the nature of your housing schemes, I assume, is they make losses in the short term, broadly break even in the medium term, and make money, theoretically, in the long term. So your net present value, when you do the maths, shows it to be positive.
Can I respond, Chair?
Mayor?
So social housing schemes are, I mean, they usually have a payback of maybe somewhere between 30 and 50 years. They are very long term. You are correct in saying that. I think the question you're posing to, I think, yourselves is that although the scheme washes its face in colloquial language and does pay back across that time, and therefore is sensible, can be viewed as sensible financially, there are choices councils make about how to utilise its funding and ability to spend money. And so I think what you're raising is are they the choices the council should be making? And the council has made the choice to build affordable homes because it has a housing crisis, temporary accommodation crisis and so on. So I think actually what you're raising is the opportunity cost of investing in council housing.
I think I'm raising something slightly more serious than opportunity cost, but we are ready.
Okay. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. It's regeneration and the restoration schemes for Custom House, Cannington and Carpenter's Estate. When it's developed, there will be 5,000 new homes. And within the housing delivery program, the objectives set out within the local policy are to ensure there's 50% of affordable homes, 39% of it to be family homes, and 10% of it to be wheelchair-friendly homes. So does it mean out of the 5,000, it will be the three things that I mentioned?
Can you just refer to the paragraph number just so I can be sure?
So it's from, well, I read it online, so I didn't have a page number. On page 15.
Paragraph number, sorry.
On page 15, paragraph 5 mentions the objectives set out in the local.
Delivering council objectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
But the other bit, I don't know where because I read it online.
Yeah, no, so that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Shaw, I see what you mean. So under that section there, that's describing what the local plan is aiming to provide through the planning process. Like all local plans, it will say here is our policy, and increasingly because of the viability constraints, subject to a viability test.
So does it mean the 5,000 homes that you're aiming to have these ones I mentioned, which is 50% affordable homes, 39% family homes, 10% wheelchair user-friendly homes. Is that what it is?
So the reality of where we would want to be, so in all of the council-owned sites or regeneration sites, we would want to maximise the supply of affordable homes as much as we could. And if the viability showed that we could do greater than 50%, then we would probably want to do that. we would probably not want to do it 100%. We might want to get some different ownership models in there into an estate or whatever. But we would try and expand it as much as possible. The limiting factor is the viability of the schemes, cost of the schemes, and how much rent comes back, and then the amount of grant we can get in. And so, sorry to be given a vague answer, but that's kind of the reality of where we end up as the reality of it. If you took those constraints away, you would want to go way above 50% because we know we've got people waiting on the housing list and we've got a temporary accommodation crisis.
Good. Goes to the Parkway.
Thank you, Chair. Just moving on from what Councillor Shah talked about. In 4.25 and 4.26, you refer to the council's objectives, and I just wondered how is the performance against the building a fair and Newham priorities being measured in real time within the strategic housing delivery programme, and what are the mechanisms that have been put in place to make sure that targets are not missed? I'm really thinking about some of what's written here in the document. Talk about obviously carbon reduction, wheelchair accessible properties, so on and so forth.
So I might call on the mayor here. I know the building a fair and Newham targets are recorded and assessed on a quarterly basis and go to cabinet. So there's a regular reporting mechanism. They come through to CLB and they go to cabinet and they go through to Mayor's Strategic Oversight Board. I'm pretty sure the house building targets go into that, but I would have to check and come back to you. But that's where the building a fair and Newham targets get reported through.
Thank you. Do you have one more question?
Okay, you may.
But I think, would you call in the mayor?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. And my second question was on section 5, and specifically 5.4. And just given what's been written in the paper around future pipelines and private sector engagement, if the council have intentions of attracting additional investment through private partnerships, how will the council maintain their commitment to 50% affordable housing, 39% family housing, and the wheelchair will come automatically, but how are we going to make sure that those commitments we have written into our policies?
And there's two things going on there at the same time in your question, I think. But the scheme viability is the scheme viability. Can you get something which washes its face or creates a small surplus? And that will be the larger factor which then determines, including grant, how you can maximise those social benefits. I think what you're hinting at is that a private partnership might come at some sort of financial cost. And that might be, but that cost might be slightly greater or slightly lower than the cost of public borrowing or whatever. I think the important thing to record is that every council is asking the same question. It wants to build homes, it has land, it has some sort of degree of credibility around house building, but it doesn't want to borrow money, but it has a long-term asset with a long-term income. And so rather than us all start from the same basis, there is ongoing work across London councils and tying in with Opportunity London, for example, to explore what works and what doesn't work in this particular area. And we're using those forums who are then engaging with institutional investors to see where the happy middle ground, I guess, arrives. Long-term patient investments, usually pension funds, where does that match into the aspirations and ambitions of councils across London? And that work is ongoing, and if it bears fruit, and I very much hope it does, then obviously we'll come through back to cabinet. We'll seek consent to bring schemes forward. But there's councils right across the country are trying to crack this particular challenge.
Chair, just a supplement to that, those members in the room that have been sitting on strategic development for any amount of time will know that the commitment and the question and the challenge that we bring to private developers in that space around 50% social housing, 39% family-sized housing is something we take seriously. And I guess my pushback to you, Paul, will be this. I understand viability. I understand what the pressures are and around that. But surely our own builds, the programmes that belong to us, we should be setting the standards and meeting what it is that we've got down on paper. So I guess maybe I'm looking for assurances. I kind of got the assurance you gave me, but you did it with caveat of viability is viability. I just think if we are to wash our face in what it is that we say to be accurate, then we would expect that our own buildings are meeting the requirements that we set out in planning policy all those years ago. So I just, you don't necessarily need to answer.
I understand.
But I guess we would expect that we would at least be doing what it is that we say we're going to do. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Chair, may I answer, please, if that's okay, being the portfolio lead? Because those are really important questions that have been raised by members of Overview and Scrutiny.
Here you may.
Thank you very much. So, Colleen, I really appreciate the point that you've raised, and absolutely, in the context of a policy position and framework, we will be looking at maximising and meeting our 50%. But as other colleagues of yours on this very committee and elsewhere on other scrutiny committees repeatedly and rightly repeatedly point out, the risk exposure to the council as it relates to borrowing combined or involving those really key considerations around viability. So the reason I wanted to interject and contribute to this part of the conversation was to say two things primarily. One, absolutely, we want to be able to meet the principle of 50%, and as you're alluding to, talk the talk as well as walking the walk. But there are really important considerations in the context of a significant financial challenge facing the council, and this is something that's repeatedly raised and surfaced at different scrutinies, primarily this one and Overview Scrutiny and Budget Working Commission, and we're demonstrating the way in which we're being very responsive to that. And equally, in the context of best value and us being diligent and demonstrating that we're diligent, we are not and cannot be lackadaisical when it comes to those very important issues of viability on schemes on a site-by-site basis. Otherwise, we would be negligent. And one thing, first and foremost, I've made it really clear, is that this council under this administration will not be negligent. So we've got aspirations, we've got intentions, we've got a policy framework that has to sit with a very challenging and at times frustrating national planning policy framework and London plan. And we're trying to do the best that we can as it relates to what we know is the housing need in this borough, which is more than 2-bedroom homes and family-sized homes, and those with the adaptations to meet the requirements of our disabled residents. I trust that helps.
Okay, thank you. Paul, the affordable homes for Newham obviously gets its money from the GLA and borrowing against the HRA. So, is there anything stopping us just merging it with Poplu to deliver a synergy? Because I know you came in before and you said that some aspect of it is working in collaboration with Poplu to save money. But what's stopping us just, bringing everything over under one umbrella, one cost, and then etc.
For council house building, for house building.
Yes, you have the affordable homes,
yeah.
Then you have Poplu, and then within the Poplu you have the Canetong, the customers, the carpenters. Why don't you just bring all of our delivering program under one umbrella?
I think that's what I was trying to say when I answered Councillor Masters' question earlier about the direction of travel.
So it's going to be under. Okay.
Yeah, to avoid duplication and overlap is to bring that focus of expertise into one place.
And when are you envisaging this happening? Because I remember asking this question some time ago. When do you think you might? It's a direction of travel. When do you think that travel would come to an end that we meet our destination instead? That's it.
It's difficult to give a date, and that's not being evasive, but we have to talk to lots of people and we'll think about processes and work out how we best do that.
I'm still not. I'm giving me anything.
I'm having a really bad time this evening, and I think
Okay, I'm going to. If time permits, I come back to that council charter.
Speaking to the point you've just made, is that not sections 5.1 to 5.3 in the paper? Is that not what we're talking about? And I'm confused. Should that not be discussed under an exempt section?
Sorry, I missed
Should
it.
that not be discussed as exempt? Should that be discussed in private? If that's the crux of this paper and the future direction of upload, I don't know if an open meeting is the right framework to be discussing this. Am I being thick tonight or what? I just don't get it.
There's no indication from the executive that this is on green paper. So as a result of that, it is in the paper. We have the monitoring officer here, the mayor is there, Paul is there.
Chair, if I may. Okay, so in my introductory remarks to this paper, I did state that there was further work being done. There's a cabinet paper that's going to be published in June. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yeah, we can.
That's the
Yeah.
public. Okay. Sorry, I can just hear some other noise. There's going to be another paper with more detail, but this paper just provides an overview and a generalized direction of travel in the context of the question that has been posed by Councillor Chadder. I don't think there's anything in the paper that requires this to go into private session. And at the point of which there is the detail for this commission to look at, i.e. relating to the cabinet paper, then there's a question as to whether material provided is on green papers or whether it goes into private session. And if I may, Chair, we've got James Cross, who's been working on a lot of detail on this, and he's been sitting in this meeting with us, and I think it would be really helpful to hear from him.
Just come back.
Okay, thank, I just hear from the monitoring officer first before James come in. Yes.
No, just to say, that's fine. There's nothing commercially sensitive in that. It's just, there isn't any detail there that would have to go into, I don't know, that couldn't be what's in the public domain, isn't it? So there isn't anything more detail going into specifics that would affect commerciality or anything.
Control issues or workforce issues.
I don't think so. It's quite, it's just broad, isn't it? It's not going into specific. It's quite high level, what was said there. It's not going into specific. I mean, I understand the broader concern, but as stated there, that is okay. Okay.
Thank you. Before James come in, can I just say, sometimes when we press for a timeline, sometimes things go on and on and on in terms of the development. For us on the scrutiny benches, sometimes it gives, when you know what you're looking forward to and when, then at least we have an idea that the organization is working towards this particular outcome and is going to hope to arrive at an outcome position by a certain time. It tells us what's happening. If not, we're going to be coming back again and again and asking the question. And also, it doesn't help us and it doesn't help members of the public who we also here to serve when they're listening to these meetings and not having an answer in terms of the timeline. I know you cannot give something set in stone, but a guesstimated timeline sometimes would be helpful in terms of guiding our thinking and our work planning, for instance. Because if we say, 2 years' time, a future committee might say, 2 years ago, they said this, so let's look at it now. Now might be the time to look at it. Without that, we don't have anything to go on.
Understood.
Yes. So, would you, so again, I'm asking the question again.
So we've had a discussion about whether that's should be exempt, it shouldn't be exempt. One of the reasons is because we commenced the work, including some of the more sensitive issues. And so we would expect that to happen across the rest of this calendar year because it's work that's already started.
Okay, so by next year, this time, you'll be in a position to give members overall, whether it's executive members, councillors, scrutiny, a position on what we're talking about here.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so in a year's time, some future scrutiny committee may want to look at it again. Okay, thank you. All right. Who else? Is there any other hands? Any hands? No? Okay. So that seems to bring us to the end of this paper. So thank you, Paul, and thank you. Sorry, I did James. Thank you, Mr. Reminding. James, is there any words of wisdom you would share with us?
Hopefully the report, as we've mentioned, things will be going to the executive in more detail on this, an opportunity for further discussions. But I just wanted to suppose that I've worked at Newham now since 2020 on the council side of delivery. We've achieved a lot. I'm really proud of what we've done. And in terms of the sort of transfer over to Populo, paragraph 5.1 does talk about a kind of soft landing to that. So that collaboration is kind of happening now. There's further work to be done, but we're able to keep going as we are, keep to the timetables of delivery, and improve on how we've delivered so far through future synergies with Populo, delivering our future targets.
Good. Thank you very much. And suppose James as the last word from the executive. Just thank you, James, for participating. So, colleagues, I move that we note this report. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, we move now to item 9, and that's update from speakers. One of the days when we finish at 9 o'clock.
Right.
Before I see Councillor Charles want to come in and bring.
I'm going to say this at the risk of prolonging the agony on this discussion, but going back to the point of the original point of this paper was to say that we had been consulted. By our own admission, we've heard several times this evening, there's not enough detail in this paper. So can we just be absolutely clear? I don't think this is, so we can note the report, but we can't actually be consulted on it because it's not clear enough. And that's not a reflection on officers. That's just because of the state of play as it is at the moment. I would not wish this to go to Cabinet with the third endorsement of overview and scrutiny when we don't know what we've been discussed.
No, but we haven't been consulted. Consult is when we have a conversation, we give our opinion. We are the executive is there to present a report and answer our question. So we're doing a scrutiny exercise, which is different from consultation.
But the paper says under section 6 that it will be noted that we have been consulted.
No, this is not a consultation.
So if we could just note.
Okay, so can we note it for the record that we are not being consulted? Yeah. Right. Councillor Masters.
Right, update from Health and Adult Social Care Scrutiny. We held our last meeting of the year on the 29th of April. We have now delivered our second report of the year, looking at the council's strategy in leisure and issues around the depth of data available and some of the trends that we've seen relating to inequalities. So we will be picking that up in a series of recommendations. A draft report has already been delivered, so that's the second report of the year from us. And hopefully that will make a useful contribution to keeping our residents who are notoriously inactive, active.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. I also held my final meeting 2 weeks ago. We discussed about the children and young people's SEND plan, and we've also discussed some of the safeguarding issues in the house. The safeguarding reports from the corporate parenting board, which we and looked after children. So we also have produced some of the reports, and hopefully what the commission contributed will be contribution the commission made. I'm hoping that it will contribute to better outcomes for children and young people in the world.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Housing and Region, we have had our last meeting this evening, commencing at 6 o'clock, and we got verbal updates in terms of the housing regulators, in terms of RMS. So they were verbal updates in what's going on in the commission question. As you know, RMS has always been a bugbear of this authority, and progress has been made in some areas, and we as a scrutiny acknowledge that, but there's also areas where they're lagging in terms of their data and record keeping and in terms of allocating work, etc. We are not quite impressed with that area of work, but officers and the cabinet members taking that on board, and obviously we'll be looking into that area. In terms of overview, we have another overview meeting this week, which is in 2 days' time on the 8th. In that overview, we'll be looking at transformation, amongst other things, and it will also be looking at our annual report, scrutiny annual report to full council. So we would be signing that off on Thursday, the 8th. Yes, we have also the call in on the 8th. That call in would be on the at 6 o'clock, and that is the call in to do with the Juniper ventures, and that would be preceding overview and scrutiny at 7:30. So those are the active, and after this week, there is no more meeting of us. And I saw Councillor Chardell in excitement. The camera pick you up on that one, Councillor Chardell.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. So that's it. So I will say thank you yet, because we have a meeting on Thursday. So this is a busy week for some of us. Tomorrow I have the Constitutional Working Group, and then Thursday, that is our, in terms of the scrutiny, and then I can thank members for their work and their support. We've done a lot this municipal year in terms of overview. We have done call-ins on behalf of the overview committee. Budget scrutiny has been very active. Then we had in-year budget, so those are some of the things that we are proud of. And obviously our annual report would mention some of the work that is being done across the piece in terms of health, in terms of region and crime, in terms of housing. So a lot of work has been done. Just read our report and you will see all the things that we are proud of that we have done over the last municipal year. So that will bring us to the appointment section. Now, there's no more meeting, but yet we appointed. But some members we have to officially ratify the appointment because they were appointed subject to this meeting. So, and they're mostly on Councillor Masters with Councillor Onover, etc. Councillor Master, you want to?
Yes, I'd like to ratify Councillor Melanie Anovo and also Councillor Shaban Mohammed. They're both joining Health Scrutiny.
Yeah. Are we agreeing to that? Agreed. Thank you very much. And as I said, our next meeting, but before I go to our next meeting, the forward plan, is there any item members want to raise on the forward plan? And this is the council's forward plan. No? Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for 2 days' time, the 8th, Thursday the 8th.
Chair,
And
just point out it's a 6:30 start.
for the Juniper,
for the meetings to allow overview and scrutiny committee members half an hour for a pre-meeting.
Okay. So I've just been corrected. This is 6:30, not 6 o'clock, but it's two meetings, the call in and then the review meeting in its own right. So look forward to seeing you there. And I'm sure then Councillor Master will take us all refreshments after.
I think that's the duty of the chair.
Okay, thank you all for attending, colleagues.
Just get the time.
The time is now 21:07.